B4D Tools. Link in the description. Beginner's Guide video tutorial. In this tutorial, I use Blender 4.3, but you can do the same with Blender 4.2 and 4.1 versions. Also, I use the current extension version of B4D Tools, but you can also use the add-on's current version. I opened a new Blender scene. I deleted the cube, light and camera that Blender's default scene usually has. To install the extension on Blender 4.3.0, you can simply drag the zip file and drop it into Blender scene, and the extension is installed. If you need to check how to install it as an add-on, please check this video. The add-on has a few preferences, so to show it, go to the Extensions tab, open the B4D Tools panel, and in the top right menu select View Details. Now, you can see the preferences of the add-on that allow us to choose if you want the user interface of the add-on in the T panel or N panel. For this tutorial, I will keep it on the T panel. First, I explain the add-on's user interface and how the tools are organized. In the BCloners panel, you will see first the generators, BCloners, which are of 6 types and useful for quickly creating instances of the selected object. Below that, you have the Plus Tools panel, which has 5 extra tools that can be combined with BCloners or other tools for better and more advanced control. Then you have the Effectors panel. Here you will all effectors that the add-on has. The effectors allow us to control and animate all instances easily, like plane, random, noise, text, etc. In the Fields panel you will see all fields available. The fields help to control how the instances will be affected by any effector. In other words, the fall-off of any effector. Below you will see the modifier fields. These tools add more power to the previous fields, like clamping, curve, color ramp, etc. The next panel is object tools. These are another type of generators. These generators work differently because don't work directly with the original object. Normally they need an extra object or setup to work correctly. The final panel, material tools. Here you will see the 3 tools that you have to control and add materials to instances. Now I add a cube as an example object. I add a bevel modifier and set a few settings to make it a bit nicer. Now, we will take a quick look at all BCloners. You have 6 types of BCloners. Grid array, as you see, by default generates a grid of 9 instances. You can create any grid of clones. BCloner linear, with this tool, you can create a line or diagonal with any number of instances. BCloner radial, with this, you can create circular, radial, or spiral instances. BCloner honeycomb, this tool allows you to create a honeycomb grid of instances. BCloner object, this tool allows you to generate instances based on the vertex, surface, edges, or volume of any mesh object. BCloner spline, this last generator needs any spline, and you can generate any number of instances along that spline. Add the spline to the spline curve parameter. Now, I delete the modifiers and the spline to show the most common and basic parameters of all BCloners. If you need more details, please check the video documentation here. So, I added the BCloner grid array again. You can easily adjust the count and size. In the BCloner linear, you can adjust the count, position, rotation, or scale. In the BCloner radial, you can adjust the count, radius, axis, start, and end parameters. In the BCloner honeycomb array, you can choose the orientation, the offset, the perpendicular variation, the width parameters, and the offset direction. In the BCloner object, you can customize the object instance and choose the distribution mode. By default is in surface distribution. Here the instances will be on the surface of the original object. In polygon center distribution, the instances will be in the center of each face of the original object. In vertex distribution, the instances will be in each vertex of the original object. In the edge distribution, the instances will be in each edge of the original object, and you can adjust the edge scale parameter. Finally, in the volume distribution, the instances will be in the volume of the original object. In the BCloner spline, first, you need to add your custom spline to the spline curve parameter. Then you can adjust the count, the start and the end parameters. Of course, here I only mentioned the more basic and easy parameters. However, you can check the rest of the parameters in the video documentation here. You will see more options to control how the instances will be generated. Let's see the clones mode. This parameter is common for all BCloners. So I added a BCloner grid array and changed the count parameters to have a cube shape made with instances. I added a cube and an icosphere as an example. The clones mode parameter, by default, is iterate mode. In this mode, the instance will be created in the order of the objects added in the Drop Your Assets Here collection. You can change the order using the ID asset parameter. In the random mode, the objects cloned will be placed randomly, and you can change the random value with the random seed parameter. These two modes are the most used, the rest are more complex for specific cases. You can check the video documentation for more details. Now let's check the BMoText object. Remember, you need to have an Any Object Mesh selected before to add BMoText. This object, as mentioned before, allows us to generate any text, and it's compatible with the Effectors, Fields, and Material tools. You can change the size, change the type of caps. You can write your custom text in the text spline parameter. You can adjust the depth, the height. You can choose the align and change the horizontal character spacing, while change the vertical line spacing, the horizontal, vertical scale and global scale. You can choose which type of caps you want and set the offset scale and bevel width. Finally, you can change the font in the first modifier. Go to the Geometry Nodes editor, and here you can choose the font. Let's check the BFracture object. I add any mesh and add the BFracture object. This works with all objects that you can put in the BFracture assets collection. As an example, I add a sphere and then I fracture it with cell fracture. I move to that collection of the result objects of the cell fracture and hide it. Now the BFracture allows us to use any effector to animate or modify all fractured instances. For example, I added the effector random and changed the parameters a bit. With this, we have seen the most important generators, BCloners and object tools. Now we take a look at the effectors. This allows us to change the position, rotation and scale of the instances generated by BCloners or object tools. In some cases, you can change other things, but in general, all effectors have the mentioned position, rotation and scale parameters. Normally the name of each effector gives us an idea of what we'll do if you add it. Effector random randomizes the instances. Formula uses a formula-like sign to control the instances. Push apart pushes the instances that are intersection. Image text allows to use of an image or image sequence to control the instances. I added to the previous grid array BCloner selected the effector plane. As I mentioned before, all effectors have the parameters to control the position, rotation, and scale of the instances. These options you can control by default node space transform, but you can change if you need it to local space transform. In the other panel, you have more options, but the most common is the visible option that allows you to hide the instances. When you add any effector, the add-on adds automatically the field called Basic Fields. This field is necessary for the correct work of any effector, and it has the basic and common parameters of most of the fields. The fields allow us to generate a fall-off to control how the effector affects all instances. With the field is really easy to have all control over the instances. By default the fall-off is infinity, so the effector affects even for all instances. Linear field shape generates a gradient fall-off between the start and end-user interface planes. You can change it with the remapping parameters and with the empty control called Control Basic Fields that is generated automatically by the add-on. You can change or animate the position, the rotation and the scale. The linear field will adapt it for any of these changes. Object field shape generates a gradient shape between the start and user interface shape. You can use any object mesh and add it to the object shape parameter, and that mesh always will be a closed mesh. Same as the linear field, you can control it with remapping parameters and the empty control called control basic fields. There are two more types of field shapes, but we have seen the most important ones. You can check the documentation for the rest of the field shapes if you need it. Apart from the basic fields, you have 8 different fields that you can use to control the fall-off of any effector. Let's see how to combine 2 or more fields. I added the random field with the BCloner selected. You need to move one modifier slot up, because the fields only work after the BCloner and before the effector. All fields have the blending mode and opacity controls to control the mix with the basic fields. Random field, for example, by default has the normal mode as a blending mode. But if you change to overlay, keeps the basic field fall off and adds the random field over it. You can choose which blending mode works better for each specific case. We saw only one field, but you can add any other field. Remember, all fields have specific parameters, so check it also. Now, let's check how works the remapping parameters and interface. I changed the field to object field, and I added a cube shape. I move the empty controller to the left. Here you can see the outer user interface shape and the inner user interface shape. So each instance that is placed inside the user interface shape will have the full changes configured in the effector. Between the two shapes, the gradient generated will control the amount of the effector. And each instance that is outside the outer user interface shape will be not affected. All fields have the remapping parameters. You can adjust the inner falloff and invert the falloff. Also, you can adjust the minute with the clamp minute activated or without, and the same with the max options. Soft falloff adds a smooth transition between the start and end of falloff. Now change the grid array to have only one copy of instances in the Z-axis. I deleted the basic fields and plain effector, and I added the effector random. I will show how to work with the specific parameters of this effector. Other effectors have also specific parameters, and if you need more info, please check this video documentation. I configured some parameters. Then I changed the field to object field, and I added a sphere mesh for that field. I changed the random mode to noise. Here you can adjust the animation speed and the scale options. Turbulence mode generates a more irregular noise. Finally, let's see the two most important tools to add the material to the instances and which control we have. I added the global material. With this you can add the same material for all instances. So I created a simple material, and then I added it to the material slot of the modifier. You also have a custom selection, and realize instance parameters if you need them. I deleted that modifier and I added the multishader. The multishader adds in order the materials in the slot materials to each instance. So I create a few simple materials. And then I added all to the BCloner material slots. As you see, by default only add the material slots in order and repeat the last material. But you can change it to activate use only material slots. So now the materials will be added in the same order. But once the last material is added, repeat again the same order materials to fill all instances. You can decide how many of the materials you want to use, and you can randomize them as well. You can change the seed if you need it. If you change the slot position of each material, the multishader changes accordingly. That's all for this beginner tutorial. I hope you learn how to start working with B4D Tools. If you need more, learn more, please check the all videos of video documentation, or with the other tutorials that I will do soon. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to support these tools.